A scream knifed through the Wyoming dawn, sharp, wet, and human. Not a coyote, not a dying horse. Something worse, something torn from a soul. Wyatt Cole hadn't heard a sound like that since Antietam. And it was coming from his fence line. Wyatt Cole lived alone on 200 acres of frozen Wyoming soil. He liked it that way. Solitude didn't betray you, didn't lie, didn't leave you bleeding. He'd built his life on that hard, simple truth, and hadn't looked back in 12 years. That morning, the fog lay thick across the hills like wool over a sleeping beast. Wyatt had been up since 4, same as always, coffee in hand, boots on the floor, breath ghosting in the cold cabin air. He was watching the sky go from black to gunmetal when the scream ripped through him like a musket ball. He dropped the mug. It shattered. So did the quiet. He didn't grab his rifle. Whatever made that sound didn't need lead. It needed something warmer. He pulled on his sheepskin coat and ran. The sound came again. Closer now. High, broken, and female. Wyatt sprinted into the white wall of mist, heart hammering, boots slicing through brittle frost. He didn't think. Didn't aim. Just followed the cry like a bloodhound, trusting instinct over sight. Then, there she was. She was tied to his eastern fence line with baling wire, wrists cut and bruised where metal bit through skin. Her buckskin dress was ripped, soaked in blood and filth. Her legs hung limp, toes barely brushing the frozen earth. She couldn't have been more than 18. Black hair matted with dirt. One eye swollen shut. Wyatt stopped, chest heaving, stomach turning. Jesus, he muttered. Don't, she croaked. Don't hurt me, please. I'm not here to hurt you. He dropped to his knees, voice low and calm. Just gonna cut you down, that's all. She flinched when he reached for her, but didn't fight. Couldn't. He worked his skinning knife under the wire, heart pounding. Who did this? My father, she rasped. He was drunk. But this time, he said, maybe someone would find a use for me, or maybe the cold would take care of the problem. The wire snapped. She collapsed forward. Wyatt caught her. She was light as ash, hollow-boned. Her body trembled, but her voice kept going, like something finally unlatched. He said I was just like my mother, good for nothing. He tied me up and left. Wyatt felt something heavy settle in his gut, colder than the frost around them. What's your name? Niall. Well, Niall, I'm Wyatt Cole. This is my land, and you ain't dying on it. Not today. She looked up at him, bruised and bloody, trying to see if he was another nightmare. Why? She whispered. Why help me? Wyatt's throat tightened. Because you ain't livestock. Not while I'm breathing. He scooped her into his arms and turned back toward the cabin. The fire crackled in the stove as he settled her in a chair, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. She curled toward the heat, trembling. Stay put, he said gently. Coffee's all I got right now. That okay? She nodded. He poured a mug, added sugar, and handed it to her. Her fingers curled around it slowly. My father, Nanai, he drinks to forget. My mother died when I was 10. After that, he fell into the bottle. I've been taking care of everything since. Wyatt pulled up a chair, and he thanked you by tying you to a fence to die. She opened her mouth, then shut it. He didn't mean it. Yeah, he did. She went silent. After a long while, Wyatt asked, You hungry? I can't remember. Then you are. He stood and began cooking. Eggs, salt pork, old bread. It wasn't much, but it was warm. When he slid the plate in front of her, She ate like someone afraid the food might vanish. When she finished, she looked up. What now? Now you rest. You're safe. For how long? Long as it takes. You don't even know me. I know enough. She stared at him, like she was trying to find the price behind the kindness. What if my father comes back? Then he'll deal with me. A silence settled between them. Then she whispered, What if I'm too broken to fix? Wyatt nodded toward the cabin. Half the things in this place are broken. Chair's got one leg short. Stove won't latch. Roof leaks in the corner. Still works. Still worth keeping. A tiny, crooked smile tugged at her lips. You're comparing me to furniture. I'm saying you matter. Even busted things can belong. She looked at her wrists. I'm tired. Bed's through there. Sheets are clean. Where will you sleep? Couch. She stood, swaying. Wyatt? Yeah. Thank you for seeing me. As the door closed behind her, Wyatt stood at the window, staring out into the mist. He'd built this life out of silence and stone. But something cracked today. He didn't choose it. But it chose him. Like this story? There's more to come. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in Wyatt and Niall's journey. More dust, more fire, more heart, and the fight has only just begun. The cabin was nothing to brag about. Just 4 walls, 1 roof, a sagging porch, and a wood stove that smoked when the wind turned north. But to Niall, it might as well have been a church, because it didn't smell like whiskey, and no one screamed inside it. She slept that first day like a stone in a riverbed. Wyatt didn't disturb her. Let her be. The girl needed rest more than answers, more than explanations. He checked on her once, just to see if she was still breathing, and found her curled up under the quilt, his old flannel shirt bunched around her shoulders, her bruised face turned to the wall like she was trying to forget the world existed. Wyatt knew that feeling. The next morning, she woke to the smell of frying salt pork and the hiss of eggs in an iron pan. When she limped into the kitchen, hair damp, wrapped in one of his towels like a shawl, Wyatt just nodded at the plate he was loading. Coffee's hot. Take what you like. She stared for a beat, then moved slow, still flinching, like expecting a trap to spring from the floorboards. She sat at the far end of the table, both hands wrapped tight around the mug, and said nothing. Wyatt didn't press. They ate in silence, save the wind chewing at the eaves and the distant creak of trees pushing against frost. The cabin had always been quiet. Wyatt made sure of it. But this was a different kind of quiet. Not peace. Caution. 2 people caught in a moment too fragile to name. After she finished, she finally spoke. I'll leave soon. Wyatt didn't look up from his plate. Where would you go? She blinked, then frowned. Somewhere. Somewhere ain't a plan. Her shoulders sagged. This is your place, she said quietly. Your life. I'm just a problem showed up in the fog. He leaned back, chair creaking under his weight. I don't keep strays. I make choices. And right now, I'm choosing not to let you go starve in a ditch. But you don't know me. I know enough. You didn't ask for this. And I got more food than I need. That's all there is. She stared at him like he was speaking another language. He could tell she didn't believe it. Not really. Later that day, she offered to help clean the place. Wyatt told her she didn't need to, but she insisted. Truth was, the place looked better afterward than it had in years. She scrubbed the sink with a vengeance, like she was trying to erase ghosts, washed dishes with care, even folded the threadbare laundry hanging by the stove. She moved like someone used to working hard and being thanked little. That night, As he added a few logs to the fire, she sat across from him on the rug, her knees pulled to her chest. "You ever get tired of being alone?" she asked. He stirred the fire with a poker. Sparks jumped up the flue. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but loneliness don't punch you in the face or scream your name after midnight." She nodded, slow. "Guess I get that." They didn't say much after that. Didn't need to. Two broken folks with firelight between them. That was enough. As she stood to go to bed, she paused at the doorway, looking back at him. "You remind me of someone," she said. "Not sure if that's good or bad yet." Wyatt chuckled softly. "I'll try not to disappoint." The third morning broke colder than the last, sunlight sharp as bone, the kind that made even the cabin's thin windows rattle. Wyatt stood at the stove, frying salt pork again, while Niall sat quiet near the hearth, wrapped in his old flannel like a shield. She hadn't spoken much since the night before. He didn't push. Some silences had to wear themselves out. He was just pouring coffee when hooves crunched over the frost outside. Not a wagon. Not a rider passing through. This was slow. Deliberate. Wyatt's body went still. The mug stayed in his hand, but his jaw set tight. Neil stiffened too. Her eyes flicked to the window. Then the knock came. 3 hard pounds against the cabin door. Wyatt didn't reach for the rifle. Not yet. He opened the door slow. The man standing there was thick in the middle, face pitted and red from a life soaked in cheap whiskey. He had the look of something soured long ago. Niol's eyes widened. Her breath caught. "Nane," she whispered. She didn't say it like a name. She said it like a curse. Wyatt stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind him. "You the one keeping my daughter?" "I found her half dead, tied to my fence like a gutted coyote." "She's my blood. You got no right?" "I got every right." Wyatt's voice was quiet, but it cut like steel. "You left her to freeze. That makes you nothing." Nane sneered. "You don't know what that girl's done. She's poison, same as her mama. Bled me dry, turned my own kin against me. She told me her mama died of fever, that you drowned yourself in a bottle and made her pay for it." Nane's lip curled. "You believe a lying squaw over her own father?" "I believe what I saw. The bruises, the wire, the fear. She's mine. She ain't yours anymore." For a beat, the only sound was wind cutting across the prairie. Then Nane stepped forward, voice slurred but mean. "I'll be back with the law. See what the sheriff thinks about some saddle tramp stealing a man's kin." "You go ahead and try," Wyatt said, still as stone. "But if you come back here drunk and mean, I won't be talking next time." Nane glared, swaying on his boots, then spat in the dirt. "She's trash. You'll learn. More." He stumbled back to his horse and rode off in a cloud of dust and pride. Wyatt came back inside slow. Niol was standing just past the doorframe, white as the frost on the windows. She looked at him like he might disappear. "You heard?" "Enough," she whispered. Wyatt set his jaw. "He won't lay a hand on you. Not again." She nodded once, tight. "He'll be back." "Maybe. But next time he won't find you afraid." Niol looked down, eyes swimming. "You don't have to do this." Wyatt stepped closer. "I do. Because men like that count on everyone else looking away." He didn't say anything else, just turned and poured her a fresh cup of coffee, same as always. And that's what broke her. She took the mug in both hands and sat by the stove. Quiet tears fell. Nothing loud or theatrical. Just the slow leaking of something cracked too many times. Wyatt sat nearby, not touching her, not asking anything. Just there, And in that beat-up little cabin, with frost on the windows and smoke curling from the stovepipe, a man who'd failed once drew a line in the dirt. He wasn't going to fail again. The wind changed the day Chato came. Wyatt knew it by the way the horses stamped restless in the corral, and how the air turned dry as gunpowder. Trouble had a scent, and this one reeked of sweat, silver, and spoiled power. Niall was out back, washing the linens she insisted on cleaning herself. Wyatt was at the chopping block, splitting wood in rhythm, when he heard hooves. Too many for a friendly call. He looked up to see 5 riders clearing the rise, dust curling behind them like a bad omen. The man in front wore a black coat and silver conchos that flashed in the sun. He rode a big bay with a white blaze and held the reins like he owned the earth beneath him. Chato, the kind of man who smiled while the fire burned, as long as it wasn't his barn catching. Wyatt wiped his hands on his jeans and walked out to meet them. Chato didn't dismount. "Morning, Cole," he drawled. "Heard you had company. Thought I'd come by and see for myself." Wyatt said nothing, just crossed his arms and waited. Behind Chato, the Apache riders sat straight and silent. Men Wyatt recognized. Men who'd once worked his fence lines, now paid by Chato's coin. "I'm here for the girl," Chato said. "Niall belongs with her people, not shacked up in the mountains with a ghost and a rifle." Wyatt's jaw tightened. She belongs where she chooses, and she chose not to die on a fence like a dog. Chato's smile faded just a hair. "That girl's father has rights. That girl's father lost those rights when he wrapped her in barbed wire and left her to freeze." Chato leaned forward, eyes sharp now. "You think you're a savior? A white knight? You're just a lonely man in a cold cabin pretending your guilt makes you righteous." Wyatt didn't move. "You done?" "No, not yet. I got law in my pocket and men who'd spill blood for me just to pass the time. I'm giving you a chance to step aside." "You'll have to kill me." Chato smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "Might be that day's coming." Then he turned his horse. The men followed without a word. Wyatt stood there long after the dust settled. That evening, he told Niall everything. She didn't flinch, didn't ask him to leave or run. She just said, "Then we make ready." They boarded the windows, moved food to the cellar. Wyatt taught her how to reload with blistered fingers. She cleaned Abby's old rifle like it was a sacred thing. And every night, they sat by the fire, knowing it might not be theirs for much longer. But Niall didn't waver, and Wyatt, God help him, began to believe that maybe a man could fight again, not just for vengeance or pride, but for someone else's tomorrow. It came after midnight. The wind had died, and the world outside the cabin felt too still, like the prairie was holding its breath. Wyatt couldn't sleep. Neither could Niall. She was sitting cross-legged by the hearth, polishing the stock of Abby's old rifle with quiet hands. "I can feel it," she said, "like a snake under the floorboards." Wyatt nodded. "Me too." Then, as if summoned by dread itself, the first shot cracked through the darkness. A window exploded inward, glass and smoke ripping through the quiet. The cabin shook with the force. "Down!" Wyatt shouted, shoving the table over just as another round splintered the doorframe. Niall was already moving. She dropped behind the overturned table, rifle in hand, eyes hard as flint. No scream, no panic, just steel. "They're surrounding the cabin," she said. 4 or 5, maybe more." Wyatt ducked low, grabbed his repeater from the wall. "Chato's dogs," he growled. "Didn't even knock." Bullets chewed the walls like termites. The air inside filled with smoke and splinters. Wyatt returned fire through a crack in the shutter, aiming low. One scream cut short. He chambered another round. "You get to the cellar, I'll hold—" "No." Neol's voice was calm, firm. "I'm not hiding." He looked at her then. Really looked. She wasn't that broken girl on the fence anymore. She was something else now. Tempered. Fierce. Determined. She raised Abby's rifle and fired through the jagged hole in the window. A man cried out. Another shot came in answer, striking the stone near her head. She didn't flinch. "We can't hold this place," Wyatt muttered. "They'll burn us out." As if the night itself was listening, flames flared along the east wall. Smoke poured in, thick and black. "We go now," he said. "Back through the root cellar tunnel. Take only what we need." They moved fast. Wyatt shoved open the trap door near the hearth. The crawl space beneath the cabin was narrow and wet, but it led out behind the ridge, a way he'd dug himself years back in case of outlaws or worse. Neol dropped in first. Wyatt followed, pulling the door shut behind him. Just as it sealed, the fire found the kerosene lamp on the table. The cabin roared. They emerged 100 yards out, behind the shed. The cold air burned their lungs, but they didn't stop. Smoke trailed behind them like a funeral veil. They ran, no horses, no time, up into the hills. Shots followed them at first, wild, drunken fire, but soon it faded. They kept climbing until the stars blinked through the trees, and the fire was a dull glow far below. They stopped beneath a granite overhang. Neol collapsed onto the cold earth, breath ragged, rifle across her chest. Wyatt knelt beside her, eyes scanning the darkness. "You hurt?" She shook her head. "Just tired." "Me too." They sat in silence, the firelight miles away now. Ash and smoke clung to their skin. Wyatt stared down at his hands, burned, scraped, shaking. Everything he owned was gone, every piece of peace he'd built. But Neol was alive, still breathing, still fighting. That counted for something. The fire behind them burned through the night. By dawn, only black smoke curled over the hills like a funeral shroud. Wyatt and Neol kept moving, up into the high country, where the pines thinned and snow still clung to the shadows. Neither spoke much. They didn't have the breath for it. 3 days on foot, chased like deer through canyons and ridgelines, sleeping in half-hour snatches under boulders and old trees, drinking snowmelt from cupped hands. Chato's men were hunting them hard. Wyatt saw the signs. Boot tracks too fresh. Horse prints where none should have been. Ravens circling like they'd found something dead and weren't waiting long to eat. It was a war of attrition now. And they were running out of road. By the 4th morning, Neol's steps had grown slow, her breath wheezing in the thin air. Her boots, half a size too big, were blood-soaked at the heels. She didn't complain. Just kept going, rifle slung over her shoulder, eyes sharp even through the exhaustion. Wyatt wanted to tell her to rest, but there was no place safe enough. Near noon, they crested a rise and found themselves looking down into a box canyon. Deep, narrow, with walls too steep to climb and only one way out. Wyatt cursed under his breath. They were cornered. He grabbed her arm. "Backtrack, now." But it was too late. From behind them, hoofbeats thundered over the ridge. Then came the shout. "There, I see 'em!" 6 riders, Chato's men, their shapes black against the gray sky, rifles already raised. Wyatt shoved Neol down into the canyon. "Run!" They scrambled down the rocks, sliding on shale, breath ragged. The canyon was a trap, and they were caught clean in it. "We hold here," he said, pulling her behind a stone outcropping. She didn't argue. The first bullets sparked off the rock beside them. Wyatt returned fire with tight, measured shots. Neol braced the rifle on her knee, and started picking targets like she'd been born to it. She dropped one of them clean off his saddle. Wyatt looked over, half in awe. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" She didn't look back. From surviving, the standoff lasted minutes that felt like hours. Then something changed. A single shot cracked through the canyon. Different sound, deeper, colder. One of Chatto's men spun off his horse, his chest blooming red. Then another fell. The rest turned fast. One shouted, "Federal Marshal, pull back!" Down the slope rode a man in a duster coat with a badge glinting on his chest, rifle still raised. His face was scarred, jaw set hard, eyes sharp as flint. Marshal Victorio. Wyatt exhaled a breath he hadn't known he was holding. The remaining riders turned tail, vanishing into the trees. Victorio stopped at the canyon floor, dismounted, and walked slow toward Wyatt and Neol. "Hell of a way to get my attention, Cole," he said. Wyatt stood, lowering his rifle. "Didn't have much choice." Victorio looked them both over. Bloodied, burned, starving, but still standing. "Looks like you've been busy." "Chatto's out for blood," Wyatt said. "And he brought the whole damn county with him." The marshal nodded. "Then maybe it's time we dragged this into the light." He turned back to his horse. "Come on, I'm taking you to Casper." Neol swayed on her feet. Wyatt caught her. "You'll testify?" Victorio asked. She looked up at the man, then nodded. "Yes." Casper wasn't the kind of place that welcomed strangers, let alone two fire-stained fugitives with smoke still in their hair. But Marshal Victorio rode them in under badge and oath, and that bought just enough silence to cross town without a noose or a bullet. They were given quarters at a quiet boarding house on the edge of the courthouse square, run by a widowed woman named Jakali, with a shotgun behind her flour tin and eyes that missed nothing. She fed them stew, patched Neol's feet, and said little. But her presence was a kind of mercy. The next morning, Wyatt sat across from the Apache district attorney, a wiry man named Nantan, with silver hair and a stare that could flay skin from bone. Papers covered his desk. Names, reports, the burned cabin, Chatto's land deeds, Nane's drinking record. "I'll be straight with you, Cole," Nantan said. "This won't be easy. Chatto owns half this damn county. The law's scared of him. And Nane?" He shook his head. "The man's a drunk and a coward, but he's still her blood. That'll twist some minds in a jury." "I don't care if they twist," Wyatt said, jaw tight. "As long as they break." Nantan looked up, studied him. "You sure about this? Once we start, there's no putting it back in the bottle." "I'm sure." From the hallway, he heard Neol's voice, clear, calm, speaking with Jakali. Not afraid. Not hiding. That settled it. 2 days later, they sat in the courtroom. Wyatt in a clean shirt he barely recognized. Neol in the dress she'd picked in Lark Hollow, now mended and worn like armor. She sat upright, shoulders back, hands steady. Her eye met Nane's across the room when he shuffled in, still smirking under a hangover. She didn't flinch. The testimony began. Wyatt spoke first, about the fence, the wire, the bruises, the scream. He kept it factual. Plain. Just like the land he came from. Then Neol took the stand. The room hushed. She told the whole of it, her mother's death, the silence that came after, the bottle, the fists, the night he tied her to cold steel and called it justice. She didn't cry, didn't stumble. "I was never his shame," she said. "I was just the part he couldn't kill." The judge didn't move. The jury didn't breathe. Even Nane looked away. When it was over, Nantan stood. That girl, he said, doesn't need our pity. She needs our protection. And she damn well earned it. Outside, the Wyoming wind had picked up again. Cold, but cleaner somehow. Wyatt leaned against the rail while Neil stared at the courthouse steps. You did good, he said. She didn't answer right away. Then, I kept waiting for my voice to break. It didn't. No, she said softly. It didn't. Behind them, Jakali waited with a warm stew and quiet strength. Down the street, Nanton spoke with the press, his words sure and sharp. Justice wasn't done yet, but it had finally gotten a foothold. And that was a beginning. The storm broke before dawn, not from the sky, but from the courthouse steps. They'd posted the notice that morning, a trial date set, names listed plain as Prairie Wind, Chato Santiago and Nane Weston, charged with unlawful detainment, conspiracy, and aggravated assault. Neol's name sat beneath it, small but bold. Primary witness for the territory. Wyatt stood with Marshal Victorio and Nantan under the overhang, rain misting through a weak sunrise. Neol stepped forward, shoulders squared beneath a borrowed shawl. She read the notice without blinking. You can still leave, Wyatt said beside her, his voice low. You gave them your truth. You don't owe them anything else. Neol shook her head. I've run enough. A quiet nod passed between them. That was all there was to say. The day bled long. Inside the courthouse, time moved like sap, slow and heavy. Neol sat in a stiff-backed chair near the front, flanked by Jakali and an older Apache man she hadn't met until this morning. A war veteran named Sani, who'd shown up just to stand behind her. Chato arrived late, slick as a poisoned knife. He wore a fine gray coat, walked like he owned the courtroom. Nane followed, gaunt and twitching, his eyes darting every which way but never settling on Neol. Wyatt sat in the gallery, jaw clenched tight. He watched every move Chato made, every whisper to the defense counsel. If the trial had allowed pistols, it wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes. But this was the law's dance now. And the judge wasn't blind. Nantan opened the case. He didn't embellish, didn't sway, just laid it out flat. The girl who vanished, the scar on her temple, the bruises on her wrists, the cattle deal forged on forced labor and silence. Then came Neol. She stood when they called her name, walked steady to the witness stand. The clerk asked if she swore to speak truth. I do, she said, voice clear. And she did. Not just what happened, but how it felt. Like drowning with your eyes wide open. Like screaming in a canyon that never echoed back. When the defense tried to twist her words, she stood firm. When they poked holes, she filled them with the strength of every night she survived. She did not cry, she did not flinch. And when she finished, the room stayed silent for a beat too long. Even the wind outside had hushed. After court adjourned for the day, Wyatt caught up to her outside. She was leaning against the rails, looking toward the open land beyond the buildings. You did it, he said. No, she replied. I just told the truth. Same thing, out here. She turned to him then, eyes softer now, but still fierce. If we win, I don't want to go back to hiding. I want to build something, somewhere no man like Chato can reach. He nodded. Then we'll find it. For the first time in what felt like years, she smiled. Not the polite kind, not the mask. The real one. Worn and scarred, but real. And behind her, the clouds were lifting. By the time the jury filed back into the courthouse, the shadows had grown long across the wood floors. Dust danced in the last beams of afternoon light, and every creak of the old benches sounded like thunder in the hush. Neol sat motionless, hands folded in her lap. Wyatt was behind her again, arms crossed, jaw locked. Across the aisle, Chato Santiago leaned back, smiling like he already knew the answer. Nanai Weston stared at the floor, his boots tapping a nervous rhythm. "All rise," the bailiff called. The judge looked older than he had yesterday. Maybe it was the weight of it all. Maybe it was the truth having finally stood up in a room built for silencing it. The foreman stood. "We, the jury, find the defendants guilty on all counts." A sound escaped the gallery. Half gasp, half prayer. Chato's smirk cracked. Nane dropped his head like someone had cut his strings. Niol didn't move. The judge ordered them into custody. Chato protested, but the shackles were already clicking. Nane wept into his collar. Outside, the wind shifted. And later, when the building emptied, Niol walked the length of the main street alone. The town hadn't changed. Same dry boards, same dust, same tired faces peering from curtains, but the way it sat on her felt different. Like she could breathe here, maybe for the first time. She reached the edge of town, where her borrowed horse waited. Wyatt was there, waiting too. "You sure about riding out now?" he asked. She nodded. "I'm done being someone else's secret." They rode out together, quiet at first, just the sound of hooves and the wind pushing low across the prairie grass. After a while, Wyatt looked her way. "You know where you're headed?" She turned toward the horizon. "No, but I know what I'm not leaving behind." They made camp near the river that night. The fire crackled low. Above them, stars spilled across the sky like someone had shot a hole clean through heaven. Niol sat close to the flames, rubbing her hands together. "I used to think freedom was a place, some hidden valley or high-up pass where no one could touch me. And now? Now I think it's just the right to start again, on my terms." Wyatt nodded. "Then maybe we start together." She looked at him, eyes wide in the firelight, not with fear, but with something like wonder. Wouldn't that be something? A soft smile played at her lips. The first one in a long time that didn't carry weight behind it. At dawn, Niol stood on the ridge, watching the river bend through the valley below. Wyatt came up beside her, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You ever think we'd make it this far?" She took the mug, sipped. "No, but I never stopped walking." He chuckled. "You're tougher than most men I rode with." "I had to be." They stood in silence a while, 2 figures against the rising sun. And then she said, "I want to build something, not just survive it all." He looked at her, and the answer was already in his eyes. "Some stories don't end. They just change course. But tell me this, if you had to choose between justice and peace, which would you ride toward?"